The lake shimmered under the soft glow of morning light, a mirror reflecting pine-covered hills and the peaceful illusion I had worked so hard to create. My cabin sat on a rise overlooking Arrow Point Lake, a fortress of timber and solitude. This was supposed to be sanctuary for me, and especially for Emily. She was 12, curious, bold, and sharp in ways that reminded me too much of her mother. After years in military intelligence, I'd seen enough of the world's shadows. I wanted Emily to grow up somewhere untouched by that darkness, so I bought land far from everything. 30 acres carved into a bend of unclaimed wilderness, or so I thought. Peace, it turns out, doesn't survive contact with bureaucracy. It started 6 months ago, with a bright white envelope stamped, Silver Lakes Homeowners Association. Inside was a cordial notice welcoming me to the community, and outlining basic expectations for compliance. At first I laughed. My property wasn't even within their zoning map. I'd checked before buying twice. I ignored it. Then came the fines, one for improper livestock, another for non-standard fencing. I had horses, chickens, and a custom-built wood fence, nothing unusual for rural zoning. I sent a letter back. I'm not in your HOA, cease and desist. Their response, a thicker envelope with legalese and escalating penalties. When I called their offices, I got the HOA president's assistant chirpy, indifferent, evasive. We've extended our jurisdiction. Mr. Cross, you'll need to come into compliance. I didn't. I wouldn't. But their pressure campaign grew. Every week, new notices. One day I found a man in a reflective vest measuring my property line without permission. Emily caught him and chased him off with our border collie nipping at his heels. I reported it to the sheriff. He shrugged. They've been aggressive lately. Best play nice. Play nice. 2 weeks later our mailbox was smashed. I installed cameras. Then one morning Emily came inside, trembling. There was a lady by the barn taking pictures of me. I checked the footage, an older woman with binoculars and a clipboard. I printed her face, circled it in red, and taped it to our fence post under the words, "No trespassing, no exceptions." That night, I stayed awake cleaning my rifle. The air felt wrong, like the tension before a mission-charged, silent, brittle. Then, just before dusk the next day, came the knock. 3 men stood at the edge of my porch, black tactical gear, boots laced tight, earpieces snug. Their uniforms had patches reading, HOA Enforcement Unit. One of them, old with buzz-cut hair and mirrored sunglasses, flashed a badge I didn't recognize. "We're here on order of the Silver Lakes HOA," he said flatly. "Your daughter is being placed in temporary care for her protection. You're in violation of multiple ordinances." My mind emptied, then filled with cold. "You're trying to take my daughter," I said, voice low, "off my land." "Sir, if you don't comply." I stepped back into the doorway and returned holding my sidearm. 3 seconds, I told them. 3, walk away, or this turns into a crime scene. Buzzcat's jaw twitched. His partner reached for his radio, then thought better of it. They backed down the steps slowly, eyes hard with unspoken threats. Then they turned and marched back to a black SUV parked just outside the fence line. No plates. Emily stood behind me, shaking, her fists clenched. At her sides, "Daddy," she whispered. "Who were they?" I holstered my weapon and pulled her close. "Bad people," I said, staring at the SUV until it disappeared into the trees. "But they don't know who they're dealing with." The weight of my past pressed forward like a tide I'd long held back. I'd left behind a life built on secrets, tactics, and survival. For her. But now they'd threatened my daughter. Now, the gloves were off. The moment the black SUV vanished down the dirt road, I locked every door, armed the perimeter alarms, and opened the steel case I swore I'd never touch again. Inside was a secure satellite phone, 2 encrypted drives, and a contact list burned into my memory like old scars. The HOA had crossed a line I didn't even allow foreign agents to step over. This wasn't about ordinances anymore. It was personal. Emily sat at the kitchen table, clutching the stuffed rabbit her mother had given her before she passed. Her lips trembled, but her eyes stayed locked on mine. Why would they want to take me? I knelt beside her and gently took her hand, because they think scaring people gets them what they want, but we're not those people. The next call I made was to Mia Trent. We'd served together in a Black Ops task force during a deployment that doesn't officially exist. Mia had a mind like a scalpel, sharp, efficient, and surgical. After retiring, she joined Homeland Security under a discrete division meant for threats that blurred the line between criminal and domestic terror. She picked up on the first ring. "Ethan, it's been a while." "Too long," I replied. "I'd need a favor." Off the books. There was a pause. She heard the tone in my voice. "Where?" "Arrow Point Ridge. Someone just tried to abduct my daughter. 3 men, tactical gear, claimed to be HOA enforcement." "That's not a thing." "Exactly. They had gear, radios, vehicles, coordinated. One flashed a badge. I've got footage." "Send it. I'll run facial scans and satellite tags." "Sit tight." I hung up and transferred the video files to my secured tablet. Each frame burned with fury. Their gear, their posture, their nerve. HOA Enforcement Unit. This wasn't a random stunt. It was organized. I began mapping out the events. The had sent over 20 notices. Most unsigned property lines had been surveyed without authorization. Our power had flickered oddly the week before. Even our water line had been accidentally shut off by a crew claiming to be community maintenance. The pattern was clear now: pressure, escalation, then attempted removal. Emily had become their leverage, and in their arrogance they'd assumed I was just another off-grid rancher they could bully. They had no idea who I was, Mia called back. 30 minutes later I ran your footage. None of these guys exist in federal databases, no agency ties, no contractor ID, but one face hit on a private paramilitary group disbanded 4 years ago after a scandal overseas. I'd bet money this HOA is hired off-books muscle. That's illegal. Extremely. I'll forward you names, but be careful if they're running this outside the system. Law enforcement might already be compromised. She didn't have to say it, but I understood. We were on our own. Later that evening, I drove down to the base of the property and met with a surveyor friend, Jerry, who worked for the county assessor's office. Jerry owed me from a time I found his lost son in a snowstorm years back. I asked him to confirm the borders of my land legally and officially. He pulled out a file, flipped it open, and frowned. Funny you ask. There was a request last month to redraw some of the parcels around your property. A company called Rusk Community Holdings submitted it. I froze. Valerie Rusk, HOA president. He nodded. Said it was to correct outdated mapping. Looked fishy, but it went through, without a vote. I can challenge it, but it'll take time. I stared at the fake badge still sitting on my dashboard. They weren't just harassing me. They were erasing me, one bureaucratic step at a time. Back home, I laid everything out on the dining table. Documents, photos, footage. Emily watched quietly as I circled the names in red ink. She didn't say much, but when she spoke, it hit deep. Are we in danger, Daddy? No, I said, locking eyes with her. They are. I wasn't about to run. I'd built this place with my hands. Buried my wife under the oak tree beside the barn. My daughter learned to ride here, read here, live here, live here. And if the Silver Lakes HOA wanted a war, they'd just declared it. 3 days passed. Not a single black SUV. Not a whisper from the HOA. But silence from Redditors isn't peace, it's preparation. Emily stayed close, rarely venturing outside without our dog, Timber, at her side. I tried to keep her routine. Steady chores, reading, horseback rides, but the unease lingered in her every glance. She was trying to be brave. I saw it in how tightly she gripped her schoolbook, how often she looked out windows. But no child should live like this, and no father should have to watch it. That's when I made my decision. If they wanted to cross the line, I'd draw a new one made of steel, sensors, and strategy. I began fortifying the property the same way I'd once secured high-risk compounds in foreign war zones. Motion-activated alarms along the tree line. Infrared trail cams, a hidden pressure plate under the gravel driveway, silent but effective. I swapped out the fake "Beware of Dog" sign with a more honest one. You are being watched. The panic room disguised as a wine cellar was reinforced and stocked. I upgraded our secure radio frequency and gave Emily a small clip-on transmitter that would instantly ping my watch if she ever felt unsafe. But traps alone don't catch predators. You have to bait them. I called Jerry, the county surveyor, and told him to file an error correction that reversed the parcel change back to its original boundaries, legally reclaiming my land. He warned me it might provoke retaliation. I'm counting on it, I said. Then I left breadcrumbs. I called the HOA office, knowing the lines were likely monitored. This is Ethan Cross. I'm rescinding any acknowledgement of your authority in filing criminal charges for trespassing and attempted kidnapping. I made sure my tone was calm, measured, the kind of voice that rattles people who are used to shouting. The next 2 days were quiet, too quiet. Then, late Friday night, I saw them. 3 figures moved through the woods on foot, dressed in black, coordinated but not trained like military. They made mistakes, stepped too loudly, paused too often. I watched from the hidden vantage, near the barn, night vision goggles tracking their every move. They approached the decoy truck parked out front, an old beater I'd rigged with a tear gas trap. As soon as one tried the door, a compressed canister hissed and burst. They stumbled back, coughing, disoriented. I flicked the floodlights on. Don't move, I called, stepping out from cover with a shotgun pointed skyward. This is private land. You're under citizen's arrest for attempted abduction and trespass. 2 bolted for the woods. But the third, likely the one in charge, raised a hand slowly and dropped to his knees. He had a sidearm, but he didn't reach for it. Called in Mia's contact team to federal marshals who had been stationed nearby thanks to her quiet pull. They swept the woods and returned with 1 more man in cuffs. The third had escaped, but not clean. One of my cameras had snagged a perfect shot of his face mid-run. The 2 we captured were cuffed, stripped of gear, and loaded into an unmarked SUV. Mia's voice came over the secure line minutes later. We've got them. Both are linked to a defunct mercenary firm out of Arizona. And guess who financed their last known job? Valerie Rusk. She didn't even try to hide the payments. Sloppy. I walked back to the house as the marshals drove away. The air smelled like pine and justice. Emily met me on the porch, wearing her oversized hoodie and holding 2 mugs of cocoa. Her hand was steady for the first time in days. "Is it over?" she asked. "Not yet," I said, taking the mug. "But we just took the first piece off the board." She nodded, her lips pressed in that determined little way she did when she wanted to be strong. I wrapped an arm around her shoulder and we sat on the swing, watching the stars blink into view. Thought this land was unguarded, that a widower and his daughter were easy prey. But they forgot. Some people retreat from darkness. Others are born in it and learn to hunt there. Tomorrow I would deliver the evidence to the district attorney, and the next day I'd see Valerie Rusk face charges for what she dared to unleash. This wasn't just my home, it was the last place on earth I'd ever let anyone take from me. Valerie Rusk didn't even look surprised when the authorities came for her. Maybe she thought she'd bought enough silence. Maybe she believed her HOA board title placed her above consequence. Either way, when U.S. Marshals marched across her manicured lawn with warrants in hand, she merely scoffed and adjusted her designer sunglasses. But arrogance doesn't shield you from federal charges. The footage I'd gathered, trespassing, impersonation, attempted kidnapping, was airtight. Combined with Mia's intelligence and the financial trail connecting Valerie's community development firm to a disbanded paramilitary group, the case practically built itself. In a televised press conference, the district attorney laid it out clearly. Valerie and her HOA board had weaponized a private enforcement unit to intimidate and illegally pressure landowners into forfeiting property. They didn't just want my ranch, they wanted a blueprint for quiet conquest: bully, harass, erase. I had simply been the first one who didn't fold. When the news hit, the Silver Lakes community erupted. Residents flooded forums, meetings, and eventually the courthouse. Turns out I wasn't the only one they'd targeted. Elderly couples forced to sell, families harassed over imagined violations, a single mother fined into foreclosure. My stand had lit a match. By the end of the week, over 40 formal complaints were filed. A civil lawsuit formed overnight, and within a month, Silver Lake's HOA collapsed under the weight of criminal investigations and public fury. But justice wasn't just something to be watched. It had to be rebuilt. I used my settlement money to quietly purchase the surrounding parcels Valerie once tried to snatch, not to expand but to protect. I redrew the boundaries with the county, rezoned the entire stretch of Arrow Point Ridge as agricultural sanctuary land immune to HOA overreach for at least 2 generations. One of the first things I did was install a tall wooden sign at the entrance of our gravel road, burned into the grain with steel letters. It read, "This land is guarded, this family is not alone." Emily helped me plant wildflowers around the base. Her confidence had returned. She rode her horse again. She started painting images of forests and freedom, of quiet sunsets and defiant shadows. That fire in her, the one they tried to smother, burned even brighter now. One evening, as we sat watching the lake ripple in the breeze, she asked, "Will they try again?" I looked at her, at the daughter who'd witnessed the worst kind of cowardice, men hiding behind fake authority and soft threats, and still stood strong. "No," I said. "Not them. And not anyone like them." Because word had spread. In a few weeks, HOA boards across the state received quiet notices from regulators and legal counsels. No more rogue enforcement, no private security, no unvetted expansions. My case had become the warning shot others needed. The image of 3 armed imposters caught on tape, slinking away from a small wooden cabin guarded by an ex-intelligence officer, made for good headlines, better deterrence. But for me, it wasn't about headlines, it was about peace. A peace hard-earned, built plank by plank, boundary by boundary. And now, finally, protected not just by fences or cameras but by the truth. People had asked me why I never went public with my background, why I didn't parade around town flashing credentials or calling in favors. The moment trouble started, simple, because I wanted to be more than what the world made me. But if defending my daughter meant becoming that man again, then so be it. I buried the last of the surveillance footage deep in a locked case, not because I needed it anymore, but because history, even painful, deserves a place. Emily hung a new painting in the cabin. It showed our ranch from above, with the sun cresting over the pines, and 3 tiny shadows in the trees below. Mid-step, caught in the light, I smiled when I saw it. "Nice touch," I said. She grinned. I figured they earned their spot, and she was right. Some battles aren't just about survival, they're about sending a message. To anyone who ever thinks they can bully their way into someone's home, remember this: you never know who's living at the edge of the map, and some fathers, they don't forgive trespassers.